I love reading Fnatic fans' comments because like they know exactly what they've gone into. You know, like they know who their team is. They are tried and true fans. They've been through every version of Fnatic. They know them at their best. They know them at their worst. And when they see them playing well, they're just like, this seems too good to be true. I don't like this at all.
Yeah, they've been hurt before.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to episode 16 of the EUphoria podcast ahead of our first round of playoffs here in the LEC. As always, we're available on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and SoundCloud.
This week, we dragged Vedius in to talk all things about our playoffs and make sure that we're hitting all the teams so you know what to expect in our upcoming playoff bracket.
And as reluctant as he was to come on, to be dragged in, afraid of the curse, so we understand it, he talked a lot. So if you like Vedius, this is the episode for you. Let's get into it. Welcome, Vedi, to the podcast.
What's up, brother?
How you doing, bro?
I'm sleepy as
I'm
all
sleepy.
hell.
We're all sleepy. It's a sleepy kind of day, dude.
Just had a week and a half off.
Yeah, what did everybody get up to? Before we get, like, obviously there's a lot to talk about in terms of League of Legends, but in the world of non-League of Legends, really quickly, like, how's life?
Got to the final boss in the Elden Ring DLC.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, and then I went to visit my girlfriend in the UK. And I...
How dare she interrupt that process?
yeah.
Selfish,
she
really.
doesn't have a PS5 either, so I couldn't even... Unbelievable. I wrote a large portion of my book.
Your book?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
You wrote a large... What is a large portion?
Well, so, like...
How
writing a book is challenging, it turns out.
There's a lot to unpack here, Betty. I didn't
realize you were going to talk about
You're going to drop
So
just...
I basically, like, as a starting point, I
Is it
wrote...
a biography?
No. It's a fantasy book, high fantasy. Yeah. I've been thinking about it, like, you guys know, I've been thinking about it for, like, literally since, like, many years. And I always said I was going to write it.
I'm trying to set you up to talk
No,
about
I
it,
get
bro.
it. Yeah. No. But basically what I did was I wrote a story summary. So I basically broke it up into like the chapters because the book is all in my head, right?
Yeah.
Or at least the many books in this very long series that I have are all in my head. So rather than just thinking about it, I just wrote the story summaries, the main beats. So like chapter 1 is like a topic. And then rather than like writing out the story, like in this chapter, I will include this. Here are some of the main beats, this. And so right now it has 14 chapters. The story summary has like 30,000 words. It's like more than some of the essays I wrote in university.
Wow.
And so like it's there's a lot that needs to be done. But the next part I'll start writing is like all the lore, like all the world building and the history and how all the different races interact with one another and like how they came to be and all that jazz. So yeah, I'm working on that. I don't know how it'll do, but how it'll come together rather is the word I was looking for. But yeah, I'm kind of writing a book.
That's exciting.
That's cool. Yeah.
Now we understand why when we're casting with him, sometimes he just spaces out completely for 20 seconds.
That's
because he
100%
has
true.
Because you've seen something that's twigged.
upload the story to the cloud.
Yeah.
You're talking about keeping the wheel of time in your brain right now.
Shout out to Miyazaki. Like, that man knows how to write a story. The Elden Ring lore is captivating. And yesterday, I watched a 35-minute video on Bloodborne lore. Which is supposedly, yeah, of course. Yep. Shout out to Vati Video. Love him. But I watched his Bloodborne video because a friend of mine, he was telling me that like Bloodborne has the best lore in any Souls game in his opinion. And I'm like, you know what? Darren Drakos told me the same thing. And Darren Drakos has tattoos of Bloodborne.
I was going to say, yeah.
And then my mate was like, I also want tattoos of Bloodborne. And then I was like, I feel like you guys are a cult.
Maybe.
And I won't get into it because if there are still Bloodborne enthusiasts, it seems that there's like a giant twist at the end, which kind of surprised me, but it's kind of cool. It's a very interesting story. So
yeah. Obviously, I'm a big Miyazaki fan. I could go down that rabbit hole for quite a long time.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like as the guy who hasn't played any Soulsborne games...
Rob, I can't.
I mean, if nothing else, I recommend you just watch the lore videos. If nothing else, just because they're really good stories. Like, I love putting them on my second monitor because Vati makes these like 30 minutes to hour-long videos, and they're just great second monitor viewing. They're really good.
Yeah, I was hoping that Elden Ring would go on sale in the Steam sale, and then I could like...
Didn't it? I swear it did. Elden Ring, the base game,
probably showed up.
Did it?
I don't know if it actually went on sale.
I swear, because Jake was
I thought I had
telling
my
me he
wish
got
list.
it on... I thought he got it on sale, but I know Jake's been...
Yeah, he's
diving into-
addicted. Yeah.
Dash literally completed the game him last night. I watched him finally kill the Elden Beast, so that was fun.
Dude, his addiction is real. Although it's really funny to watch Jake get sidetracked on Supermarket Simulator.
What is his addiction to that game? I've watched that and I don't get it.
That man... Look, I understand his brain chemistry, and all I'm saying, I could have seen that one coming.
I guess it's big of me to talk when I spent thousands of hours in Lost Ark, but
you're like, we're like, what is this guy doing? You see, look over, pan over to you, you're like looking for the little fruits or whatever in every area, like 30 of them.
No, it's fair, it's fair. We've all got our crutches, I guess.
I did love how Asterix came in and like had never played Elden Ring, and then he spotted you, Drakos, and was just like, parry.
Yeah.
I tried to parry everything. I couldn't parry. Then I parried. Then the parried. Then I parried.
You would think that's hyperbole, but that's an exact quote. I had to explain. It's not Sekiro, Jake. It's not Sekiro. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, no, you can't parry every move, Jake.
We should make a video game podcast, guys. That's what.
This is only fine. Like, we can go for a long time on Elden Ring. There's definitely something to be considered there. Rob, did you get anything? You talked about Steam sales.
No.
Did you get nothing? Boys.
Well, the problem I had was
the
more
part of the
wasn't
machine.
here.
No.
Hey, you put money back into the economy, boys.
So the thing is, people who are more astute might have noticed that I actually haven't been bringing in a laptop anymore. And that's because when we were over at MSI, I dropped the bag that had my laptop in it, and now my laptop doesn't work anymore. So I went back. So I have to get a new one. But when I was back I went back home to Ireland for a little bit. But I don't have anything to play games on anymore. So while I was there, I was just like, crappy mobile games.
GeForce Now is a game changer.
GeForce Now.
Yeah,
Shadow
it's
PCs are
crazy.
crazy.
Yeah, Shadow PCs.
Okay,
There's a bunch of other ones as well, not GeForce, because I think our producer Depp was telling me about a different one too. There's a bunch, but you're a bit like you can either pay for like day pass or you can pay subscriptions or whatever. But basically, you just connect to another PC.
Yeah,
and
well,
then
there
it
was
streams the
nothing
game
in my
to
house,
you.
in my house back in Ireland, because everything
You
either
need-
came
as
with
long
me
as you
or
have
is in
cracked
use.
internet, you
Yeah,
can
the
literally do
internet
it on
is
a
on
tablet.
Yeah, my
Oh,
guy.
really?
Yeah. No, the laptop itself doesn't, because I went to my girlfriend's and I played on this, and then you just it's
I've
great.
played like not super intensive games on an iPad with just a keyboard and a mouse.
That's not bad.
Like-
Okay, should have got that then.
100%.
But it costs a decent amount of money per month.
It
And also,
does.
I have done literally no research. If it turns out that this is not secure at all for whatever reason, like because to me it feels too good to be true. Don't get me wrong, $30 a month is a pretty heavy price tag, but you're basically renting, a top of the line PC for $30
But
a
there's
month.
also you can get it for free. There's like a free version.
Yeah.
Like
I don't
you
know
just have to
about
watch
that, but-
ads and stuff, and like it's but
You're halfway through playing Elden Ring and this ad just
I
pops up. You're like,
I've never I don't know, because I only ever pay for it, so I don't know exactly how that works. But
Jake's trying to parry the ad.
It makes every game like freaking Candy Crush, where you're like, oh, do you want to pay for new attempts and new levels? You're sitting there, you're like, I just want to kill the last boss, please. It's like, nah.
my actual problem is that like the bulk of my games are on console. I'm a console gamer. I only use
you're
PC.
such a fraudulent console gamer. I'm sorry.
How am I a fraudulent console
I've been to
gamer?
your house. What you do is you buy every game you're excited about, and it sits on a shelf in your house.
It doesn't always
for
sit on a
5
shelf.
years,
No,
and then you
no.
stream once a week for a month, one time a year, one game.
No, shut up.
Where you can't see chats. That's the
You're-
important
I- and I don't want to gatekeep you.
Stop.
I don't want to gatekeep you. But a lot of people would be like, hey, I've got kids, I can't game anymore. It'd be fine. Your child is Lost Ark. You're a PC gamer. You are not a console.
No, MMOs and competitive games on my PC. Single player games, I play on my PlayStation. I can't enjoy single player games on my PC. And I've had this argument with Medic many times, but I can't, man. Other console gamers understand, but most people are just like, just play
I
on
think
a
there
PC,
is
bro.
a feeling to like sinking into your sofa with the controller and just been like, oh yeah, cool. I'm just gonna.
There
Also,
is
if
that.
you work
delve
on your
into this.
PC, like a lot of people work from home these days, it is really nice to not be in the exact same setup that you work at.
Yeah.
But it's also just like, it's how I always used to game. Like PS1, PS2, that's what my primary gaming stuff was. You know?
Man, we could just go into maximum nostalgia right now. PS2.
Yeah.
Probably.
The sound
Oh, I
effect,
was
bro.
gonna
Have you ever watched those videos that randomly come and they're just like, only millennials will know this sound? And then you get all the different sounds. One of the
Yeah.
favorites being, you wouldn't download a car. See, and I mean, I'm like, if I could, I would. I'm just telling like,
All right. Outside of like 2 or 3 games on the GameCube and like Halo on Xbox.
yeah.
I'll put Gears of War in that as well.
Gears of War was until 360. The PS2 was the greatest console of that era and was pretty
Hell yeah.
unmatched. PS3 was trash, but and 360 took over, but the PS2 goated in that.
I
era.
remember me and
so many
Lyric
good
bonding
games.
over The Legend of the Dragoon. How much we were obsessed with that game. I
Oh
don't know
my
if you
god!
remember that.
No,
JRPG.
so what's funny is
So
that game
good.
is one of those
don't know
things
that
that
game.
either you have played and have been insanely obsessed with, or never heard of.
Yeah.
I think Flowers is in the Dragoon camp. I can't
yeah,
remember. I'm trying to remember everyone who has heard of it. But
It's such a bang.
My PS2 game was Jack and Daxter, and then when Jack and Daxter 2 came out, and he was all
and it was
edgy and
GTA.
older.
It went from Mario knockoff to GTA, where you're just murdering. It was like, what the hell?
I felt like I was like, damn, I can relate. You know, like, I remember feeling
You're
like,
like,
I was like,
I too have been strapped into a chair and tortured and pumped full of weird chemicals.
and I did like that sort of stuff, like the dark undertones really kind of went over my head when I was younger, but I felt like, yeah, I'm edgy too. Like that was the thing.
Yo, that's
Yeah.
the funniest
And then when he
thing.
started speaking, and then I was like, oh, he speaks now? Like, yeah, bro, crazy.
All I'll say is it's so funny to look now at like how serious we took ourselves as
100%,
teenagers,
bro.
Yeah.
and then look at that from third person,
Yeah.
where you're like in your house and you're like the same hoodie you've worn for 4 days straight. Your room is just disgusting, and you're like, no one understands me.
Yeah.
It's like, they're just
Yeah.
very self-involved. Not that we're like 100 times better. I think we're just a little more self-aware about it these days.
100%.
Regardless, League of Legends is the name of the game today.
All right.
Not anything else, despite a couple of sidetracks. And a lot of people did ask about like what we've been playing, etc. So, that conversation didn't come from nowhere. A lot of people wanted to know what was going on. But since we've last talked, 2 of our teams have died, for lack of a better word.
They're never coming back, baby.
We're at
They're
a funeral
not.
now.
We're Jack and
Everybody
Daxter 2 now.
yeah. Speaking of Jack 1 to Jack 2. Yeah. So, Rogue and Vitality. Out.
Yeah.
There was a chance of it if a different team, if Mad, for example, had fallen out, that they could have qualified for season finals. But this is goodbye to both of these teams. They don't have enough points. There is no circumstance in which they can progress further or make top 6 to make season finals. So this is the last we see of these teams. And here's look, I don't want to sit in the eulogy section forever. So here's my question to you boys. Rough a year as it was, you can save one player from these teams. It's a Titanic moment, right?
Kazi.
Yeah.
No, from each of the teams. All right, Carzy.
Just Kazi.
No, just Carzy. Let's talk about it. I mean, this is...
I mean, Rogue had, I think, the worst year in their career. I haven't,
Yes, it was hands down.
Yeah.
Other than the first year, the first split that they started, they did terrible, and then they instantly were much better after that first split.
that's fair. So you're 100%
This
right.
is the worst year. Hands down.
It's, they made just one, they made 2 changes. They brought Zoelise in at the beginning of the year, right?
Yep, and then
and then-
Shigenna got swapped out for Finn.
Right. And I just,
Marcoon. When did Marcoon come in?
Marcoon came in this year too, actually.
but that was at the beginning of the year, right?
That was the beginning.
Because
Yeah.
SK lost Marcoon, and then they got Isma, and then Marcoon joined Rogue. I'm pretty sure that's how that happened.
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't really understand how they just never changed. The thing that I always associated with Freddie was he was kind of what BDS was in a sense, in that he was very good at instilling a formula within his teams, and when Rogue was good, one of the criticisms we used to give them was that they were predictable in a sense.
Yeah.
I think the best version of Rogue was that they always tried to draft winning lanes, right?
Yeah,
And,
3 winning lanes, and then
the jungler kind of just played around the fact that they had winning lanes all the time, and then they play for the jungler plays for them, blah blah blah. But we just haven't seen that at all. There's just a complete lack of proactivity. It feels like the issues that plagued them at the start of the year never stopped plaguing them, and it's kind of sad because I know that a lot of those players are very good. It was a heartfelt and difficult interview to watch comp at the end because there's degrees, right? Because it's easy when you just kind of look at Rogue the brand and you see the results and you watch the games and you sit there and think, this team is bad, they're not fun to watch, I don't want to engage. But then it's very easy to forget the players that are behind that have to work incredibly hard. They're grinding every week. Comp was talking about how he felt this split stuff was coming together. They were enthusiastic about their scrims. They started really early. They really cared. The players wanted to do their absolute best, right? And whenever you spoke to the players, Finn was always a ball of optimism. Mm-hmm. He was always telling you how he had high hopes for the team. Top 3, he thought, this split. He was confident. And you just can't help but feel bad for the players because you have to imagine that they tried their best, but they just could not make it work. And what didn't work, I can't say I really understand. But
I mean,
it's,
they talked about the team not clicking, and fundamentally that team was bad, right? And I think that the
100%.
tragic thing is that they kept kind of continuing with the same experiment despite results and like praying for something better. So it feels like they spent their entire year grinding against whatever it was that was holding them back,
Pretty
whether
much,
it was, and I don't want to point any fingers. I think no one on this team looks good coming out of this. Like, there's no redemption for anyone.
Yeah,
like you talk about vitality for Carsey, like there's not a single player who comes out of this team. And that doesn't mean that I think that they shouldn't get a chance somewhere else, right? It's just,
100%.
but like this was so rough the entire year that it's like outside of one or two moments and one or two games, like this entire year, you're like, nobody walks away from this.
But I don't think you can like really point a finger at an individual because there were so many changes within the team, but it did nothing, right? So it's not like there was one person where you're like, oh, you're the person that's messing up the play or you're not getting involved in it. It was like clearly there was just whatever the ethos or the way they approached this game on the team just wasn't working out. Yeah. And it just feels like that was where it's like a complete lack of communication. Nobody knew where they're supposed to be playing for, what they were supposed to be doing at any point in time. And it just falls apart from there.
Well, I mean, the counter argument to that is that the consistent Larson comp never instilled like a way to play the game, right? And so I think of Perks is one of the easiest examples throughout like LEC history of when you join a Perks team, you're going to play the way the Perks want you to play, right? Yeah. Like for better or for worse, he's a guy that has a very clear idea of what he thinks the league. Like Hilly is another example, right? Like Hilly is a defined play style. When you join a team with Hilly on it, you know what you're going to get, right? And I feel like that when it came to Larson and Comp, who in theory should be like the veterans, the guys that this team is built around, there should be a clear identity. And so like you could put the failing on them. Like it's kind of a matter of perspective because I think that without full information, there's no perfect. You can pick who you want. Like if you want to murder someone for the team or whatever, right? I think that I was disappointed with a lot of people. I think Zoelise is like as a rookie, don't have the biggest expectations from him. Mark Kuhn is still a younger player. I think he didn't show any of the spark that he showed on SK, which was really sad. But yeah, for Larson and Comp, it's like. Comp was pretty bad individually most of the year. Mm-hmm. Larson was fine in lane most of the year, but again, felt like if in the past he had been criticized for being passive, right? Like, and that was like 50-50 true versus BS. Like this year, come on. Like that man was in lane 90% of the game. Like I don't have the stats on hand, but we could check it. Like this was a team that it was grim, boys. And so like if Rogue come back next year, when Rogue come back next year, if they come back with pieces of this roster, I hope that they have a clearer, more defined plan and something to tell us as the audience, because I felt like we were in the dark most of the year too. Because every time we talk to Rogue, it's like, yeah, I don't know what's happening. Like it's not showing up like it did in scrims. And I don't know what they're supposed to say. Don't get me wrong, but like, what are you supposed to say?
Yeah, but like it would be really because like I want to empathize and I want to be there on that journey with any team in our league when they're doing poor, so we can understand what's going wrong, what they're working on, so we can have that level of empathy. But when it feels like it's mostly, radio silence, and part of that is they lost a lot, didn't have as many opportunities to interview them. Like it's really hard to understand.
I can't I haven't been on the managerial side of how running a team works.
Sure. But
I do like the fact that Casey just scrapped half their team and said we're going to try again. Right.
Sometimes you have to.
And like Fnatic did the same thing last year. I don't know if XL was extreme last year when they made their run in summer. But like Heretics, I think got VTO, right, in that third split. Yeah. And so like sometimes I just think they needed a more dramatic change, and nothing against Finn, but I think that they just needed something more dramatic than whatever it was that they were doing, because if you can find out that after two splits we're not functioning, I really don't think changing your top laner is the role that's going to have like a huge identity shift. But yeah.
The other side of the coin is Vitality. Rob, they were here. We saw them. They were all smiles and joy. And they were on a losing streak already. It did not get better. Some people would say EUphoria curse. I would say, guys, you have no proof. Don't. I have literally.
Wait, does me being here mean that I'm not going to complete the DLC?
No, yeah. You already cursed. It's actually about your novel. You're doomed. You're going to go home and just going to boom, flames.
If his PC or something crashes and corrupts the file, we're screwed.
Then we actually are cursed. And in that case, we're inviting every LCK and LPL team on the podcast during Worlds. Also LCS, that's crazy. Hey, Spawn, come on over. TL's looking pretty good. Talk to us about it. Still think it's BS. Anyway, Vitality, let's talk a little about this team. This is the biggest surprise of the year, I think it's safe to say, for me at least.
Yeah, I think especially when you look at the caliber of players that are on us, like if you look individually, like Photon for a while was talked about as like top 3 top laners. You look at Karzi, who's for a lot of people and myself included, the best AD carry that we have in our league. Like it felt like you had individual performers in this team that really should have been able to step up, but it felt like whatever the experiment was that they were trying to pull with playing around Hilly and making sure that he can play this weird game just never worked out. And I think partly, yes, you can say that the 2 lads are saying, look, it's trying to get buy-in from the players to play this game. But it's like, look, if you don't have buy-in and you're just trying to get to a position where you're fine, just pull back. Just say, look, we need to actually get to playoffs. We need to get to a position where we can have more games and then we can try and fix this again. But it just never really came together. And I think it's kind of heartbreaking because I like a lot of the players that are on this team and I want to see them do well, but I don't know. It's so frustrating to just watch games where you're like, oh, you have a good position. And then you watch Hilly just walk into 3-4 members and die or get caught out or not respect TPs or movements or ultimates that might be able to come in like a Talia wall or something. It's like, I don't know. It was very, very annoying to watch this.
So it wasn't so much of a surprise to me.
Really?
We wrote in our song at the beginning of the year, surely this time Vitality will surely be the super team this time.
This time, yes. Oh, I forgot about that one.
And so like there's something wrong with this
Speaking
organization.
of curses, I was like, oh, they come out, cursed org, cursed podcast. I thought it would cancel them out. I was in your corner, Vitality.
That's a super curse.
I don't know. I don't know what happens with that organization. Shaka has made this hilarious tweet, which Kazi replied to, where he was like, Kazi on Mad wins. Next year, Kazi on Vitality has a really bad year, comes back to Mad, wins Spring in our 3 split format, right? Leaves Mad, bottom of the table again. And then Kazi like responded to him being like, shut up, Shaka. It was quite funny. But the things that stood out to me was that, first of all, shout out to Douglas. He was not the problem. Like, all the best to Linces. I know that he was very hyped coming into the LEC. Yeah. I'm sorry that he didn't get to showcase what he did in the ERLs. I do hope that he gets to show more. But this was a comment that, like, I heard from... credit to I Will Dominate. I originally heard this take from him. But he didn't believe that flitting in a rookie into a team with this many veterans was a good idea, with Douglas specifically, because you've got these very clear ideas around how to play the game, and as a rookie you're just kind of forced to fit in, and it can be difficult to have that like conversation around like, well, this is how I want to play the game, because you're surrounded by people who like you got Vito is on this roster, like MVP when he was on Misfits, when he was doing really well on that team, it was all because that roster was like playing for him. You've got Photon, who's this crazy carry top laner, who's like one of the best in the league right now in terms of individual top lane performances. And then you've got the crazy experienced bot lane that has like titles, right? So if you're a rookie joining that roster, what are you supposed to do? And like, I think Douglas was finally finding his form in Spring, and then they replace him. And I felt like that they then just took a step back, and then they had to refigure out how they then make this team work with a new rookie. And now he has to figure out how he fits into this roster. And I feel like that they just never really found this identity. And I think it only got worse where you had this perpetuating clash of ideas. And I also think this isn't new, because like we've also heard this from when Elyoya and Hilly, they used to clash all the time. And we heard it from the coaching staff that they clashed on their philosophies and how they wanted to approach the game.
And I think the thing that they made very clear to us last week, and obviously coaches, I would never expect a coach to come on here and like talk about Discord in their team, right? So they're going to give us the most polished version of their team, even if they were, I'd like to think, pretty open. They talked a lot about that's one of the things that they felt like they had achieved in theory or were working towards on this team was everyone being on the same page and kind of playing under the same philosophy. And it seems like that philosophy was Hylissang's philosophy, right? So to me, it's like, I'm less I philosophically understand the take that you brought up there, but I think to me it's like they wanted one very specific thing from their team, and I think because they said it and because everyone was going toward it, I just think that just might have been the wrong choice. I don't even think it's a matter of these clashing personalities. I just think that like they clearly...
It's more so that the point I had was that like I felt like as a team, they were getting to a pretty solid spot.
Yeah, we thought they were top four. Like this was a top four team in our league.
And then they hit the reset, right? By introducing Linces, where I just feel that no matter what you do, no matter how good that player is, there's some degree of you now have to backpedal where you got to because you're introducing a new player. And obviously some teams that really clicks.
I agree with the backpedal.
And you only have 4 weeks to fix that, right? Yeah. Like our split, our regular season is very ruthless in that sense, where it does like cull the weak in a sense.
Damn. All right.
But yeah, like it's kind of designed to get rid of the worst teams in the league kind of quickly so that the best ofs can then feature the stronger teams in theory. Yeah. And so and
I do agree with you because I think there's like, when I look at bringing a jungler into a team full of veterans, I think if you, like, when I look back to FPX and Bo back then, right, it was like, hey, you got a bunch of world champions. And I think the reason Bo slotted in better than we see like Douglas or Linces is because that team had a very set identity as to how it wanted to play the game. But it was very easy for a jungler to have that through line of, oh, this is what we are going to do. We're going to play around bot lane. Doomby's going to work with you. We're going to have that set up and it's going to be very simple and easy to execute. When you're playing as a jungler with Hilly, you have to try and work with this guy who has an incredibly unique way of seeing the game that you don't really fully understand, because the whole point of it is that Hilly sees the game differently to you. So you have to try and learn to see those moments alongside Hilly so you're ready to dive in at a moment's notice. But when you're Douglas and you're only just starting to get used to it, that's where I think I agree with you. I can see that, oh, now Vitality are starting to work together because Douglas is starting to understand what Healy wants in these moments, but then you just randomly have to start again when you bring in a new jungler.
And that's not even to put the blame on Linces, because I'm really not trying to, right? But like, I 100% agree, like, and maybe the whole identity thing that we're talking about is a smaller thing in the grand scale, because I didn't get to rewatch all the games, but I did rewatch Vitality versus SK. And when we talk about SK, this is going to be important. But like Vitality had taken down 2 inhibitors, had a Baron. And like I was watching that game and I was like, this is a 1 game. Yeah. And they didn't just like, they lost games like that a lot. Like, and I'm just like, guys, what is going on? Like, I wish that I had a very clear-cut analytical answer as to what happened in that team, but it is not obvious to me when that roster was in such winning positions. Like, in theory, you could have taken any mishmash of LEC players, put them in that position, and they would have been able to win. So, like, I don't know what happened. I don't understand. That it's a confusing team. I'm talking about this identity thing only because I feel like that they did take a step back when they were already in a good spot. But quite frankly, like, the way in which they threw games, I can't explain. I don't have a good answer for that.
And what I will say, in defense of the Vitality Project and Mac and Pack, because they were here and they gave us this insight, so I don't want to pretend like we didn't hear it, is like there was much more of a long-term choice. I think that it's really interesting to build the roster in a long-term perspective. I think that it is a privilege that only teams that have like either insane pedigree or already have like a 3 or 4 man core that they know can win championships. So like a G2, Fnatic when they're at their best, Rogue or Mad Lions when they're at their best, can afford to change, like 1 piece, 2 pieces and look more long-term. I don't think it's something that a team fighting for, in this case, playoffs or fighting for top 5 usually has the luxury of doing. They wanted to go for it. I think it bit them. Again, I don't think it's Linces. I think that the absolute collapse here is more than just a single change. But I agree that I don't think that it did them any favors to make a swap when they were essentially a top 4 team. And if their angle was, hey, this roster gets us to season finals but doesn't get us to Worlds, like we need to do more, sure. But
I mean, we'll see what changes next year, right? Because like,
if they keep the exact same roster next year, I would be surprised, but it would be a very big commitment to the long-term
100%
philosophy, which, in the case of a couple individuals, especially a player like Nuke, right? Where this guy has been the franchise player of BDS, brought over from Schalke for a million years. And he was not great for a lot of those years and is finally really coming into his own this year, especially. Like, it does work if you're willing to invest the time.
I mean, I genuinely think like, that mid laner is the role that if you get a good mid laner, you don't want to let them go. Yeah. And credit to BDS or like whoever on that coaching staff said, I believe in this player. I want to keep them because I think that in the long run, they'll pay off. Like Nuke is paying off, credit to him. But like, I wonder if that is VTO for Vitality. Like he's obviously had highs. He hasn't had a big high for a while now. But hey, like if their goal is a long-term project and they see Vito as that championship winning mid laner for them, I genuinely think in Europe, especially like when it's dominated by caps, a strong core is what you need. And I really think it has to exist in mid, because if you like, that's the man you got to overcome, right? Yeah. He is the pinnacle of Europe. And so you need someone who can at least go toe to toe with that individual.
Just to get to the starting line.
Yeah, just to get to the starting line.
It's also just like probably the most important role on the map in terms of like when I'm building a roster, like your mid laner knowing what's going on, it has the most influence over the game, because no matter what meta,
I mean, it's definitely changed, but I agree.
No, but I think like the way that every single meta like has mid in some position of value, whether it is a Doinby playmaker or a hyper carry or whatever, and like your mid is also like positioned to be the most influential role on the map. So it's like it's not that mid in any given meta is going to be the most important role from a meta perspective, exactly, but from like a team cohesion perspective, your mid laner is involved, whether it's top lane or bot lane or wherever you're playing around in anything and everything. 100%. So to me, that alongside like jungle support, like AD carry top lane, I could give, who cares? Yeah. You got a great AD carry, great. But if the rest of the team isn't ready to play around that person, it doesn't matter. But like great mid laners, it's like, you can play around them, you can not play around them, they can do whatever they want, you know? They can define a team strategy if they're good enough at one style, for better or worse in the case of guys like Leader, right? Like mid laners are team defining. So I agree with you.
We'll see.
So goodbye to Rogue and Vitality. We'll see you guys next year.
Best of luck.
Best of luck in the off season. I hope that, you know, for the players, I hope you can find some peace.
Expect emails. You'll be joining the analyst desk soon.
It's like you got.
No, that's not like a mean thing. I mean, like, we need people on the desk. Come give us your insight. We really want to hear your opinions.
We do. Let's get into some community questions. Thank you to everyone on Twitter and YouTube. I'm going to try to get Discord questions up next week, too, because I appreciate all the places that we have a nice little LEC community. Let's start with one. And I know we haven't talked about this week's games upcoming, so don't worry. That's kind of the last big chunk of the show. That's coming up after this section. But from Samurai CER, which team do you think has the most to lose? Not necessarily just elimination, but like could be in a world of trouble heading into season finals.
The most to lose?
I have two answers. There's two answers for me.
I actually think the one for me, which is funny because they won't be there, is Vitality. Because it's like you have...
They've lost it.
But that's what I mean, right?
It's like to lose and they've lost it.
Because it's like you built up this whole thing of, hey, it's going to be a project. We're going to work on this for such a long time. But you have great players. You had the budget. You had the time to try and do it, but it hasn't worked out, right? So now the question is, what does that now look like coming into the new year? Does that whole project just get pushed out the window because you haven't gotten at least the bare minimum results to keep
that's
alive?
fair.
Yeah.
I don't know how to answer that question. I think Fnatic would be my instinct.
Fnatic and SK are my two.
What do SK have to lose?
They have no freaking points. If they fumble at all, if they fumble the bag, like they can literally not make season finals if they fumble the bag.
Okay, I mean, that's fair. I'm looking at it from the context of like in the ecosystem. And I'm kind of like, one of the things that someone pointed out, which we're not like blind to, but we always put like Fnatic in the context of like title holders, right?
Sure.
The last title was like 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, and like at some point as a commentator, I just kind of need to stop.
Well, the thing is like,
so I feel like if they then don't even come close, because people are going to assume that G2 is the favorites, right? Which makes sense. I totally get that. But then you saw them in the regular season and people were like, oh my God, this is it. Fnatic's back. And then they lose to G2 and now they just haven't. I heard that they went 0-2 at EWC. They got smashed by Team Liquid apparently. They've also like lost their last 3 games in the LEC. They went from being 6-0 to 6-3, now 4th place. I feel like that at some point you just kind of have to be like, when do Fnatic become like, are they just where SK is now? Like in the grand like ecosystem of the narrative, you know, like sure, they've won a bunch of titles before, but it's been like, how many years do we give them, right?
I mean, the thing is they are pretty consistently, they manage to come back and get back to the top. Like SK has literally never been at the top. Like they've been close a couple times to just like
true.
Right. And so that's the thing. I think that's part of like, certainly a certain amount of it is Like they
Because
have
like
a
BDS
pedigree
this year is like top
and a
3
history.
consistently, right?
Yes,
So like
yes.
their narrative is shifting, right?
Well, and I think BDS should be in that discussion of teams, and have been when you look at tier lists in our discussions. Like, there's an assumption just for BDS that they will be a top 4 team.
that
You know what
should
I mean?
exist now. Yeah.
I think
But I think just on BDS, I think they also said in this, like, a bit to lose is like if they fail at playoffs again and if they fail at season finals again,
That's a good
that
point.
narrative then is like you're not there. Like you can't hit playoffs, you're not a top team.
Yeah.
And it's like if you can't perform and the chips are down, I think
I mean,
they're
pretty much a lock for season finals, right?
Yeah. G2 is 100% locked
Because they won.
because they've won, right? And then there's Fnatic, Team BDS, and even Mad Lions. Mad Lions is not 100% locked, but like Team BDS, Fnatic, and Mad Lions are all incredibly close to locking.
super high percentage scenarios,
which is crazy because Mad Lions like crawled into our playoffs.
Just want to clarify for the ones that are really worried about Mad getting to Worlds. Yeah,
They are close.
You need top 3 in season finals. We don't have a 4th seed as far as I understand. So unless that changes, you need top 3, which means you have to win at least 2 best of 5s to qualify
Winner
for
of
Worlds.
Summer is guaranteed a world seed.
Okay.
And then the top 2, if it's not one of them, go. Otherwise, it's
Yeah,
placement.
but then basically what'll happen is like, let's take the situation of BDS last year where they lost their first round to G2. They beat SK and then they met Fnatic.
Yep.
They qualified for Worlds anyway because we had a 4th seed.
Yep.
Now that wouldn't happen. They would have had to have beaten Fnatic for them to be in contention of earning a World spot. So just to clarify, like for Mad, for them to qualify to Worlds, they have to win 2 best of 5.
Hold on, I have to do, or you want to put it up?
So I was going to say, so just from our stats people, the percentage of scenarios that each of the teams will still make or will hit the season finals qualification is Fnatic 99.5%, BDS
Of the scenarios.
And
Of the
99%
scenarios,
of scenarios, Fnatic make it. 97%.
BDS make it, 96% MDK make it. So you still got a very, like, basically those guys are almost guaranteed to make it, and then you start to drop down to like 60% for Heretics. But
And so for anyone that's a little confused, the easiest way to look at it is like if we were to play 100 different like timelines, 99 of those like Fnatic.
It's just literally
exactly.
It's just every possible scenario. To be clear, it's not. It assumes
50,
nothing
50
about team
odds,
skill.
doesn't it?
Or how
It
good
just
they are,
says,
how
it
bad
says,
they
all
are.
right, here's the world where this team wins, and then this team wins, and this team. It's just every possible scenario.
I
And how
see.
many of those scenarios does the team lock?
I see, got it.
Right. It's the Doctor. It's the reverse of the Doctor Strange meme. In the case of most of our top teams, which is crazy for Matt again because it's all because of Winter, really, that they have as many points as they do.
Oh, Winter, yeah.
And for SK, right, they're in a situation where if the top teams, if a team like Fnatic stops being a top team and just completely crumbles, that's a big problem for them. Because at this point, Fnatic has a lot of points. 60 in Winter, 120 in Spring. Everyone is guaranteed 45. And if you're struggling to keep up with championship points, math, Fandom Wiki has an excellent little graph you can follow along with. But they're just baseline guaranteed 225 points, even if they scrub out. SK Gaming has 125 right now, guaranteed, if they scrub out. So they're far behind. Despite how good they are, they're far behind. Like, they cannot blow up in best ofs again. Or
The
this
other
all
thing
just
is
goes to
top
shit.
3 in summer qualify for season finals.
Yeah.
Right?
So, to clarify,
so if we have
top-
a situation where KC, Giant X, and Heretics are our top 3 in summer, then it gets weird, right?
Yeah, so KC, Giant X, and Heretics would qualify.
I have a lot of questions.
And then G2 would for sure qualify, and then very likely just Fnatic and BDS would qualify, and that would be it. KC can only go by getting top 3. Again, top 3 seeds, everyone else's championship points. A winner of previous splits are also guaranteed to spot. But when in doubt, top 3 go, everyone else's points, more or less.
Yeah. But obviously G2 have won Winter and Spring.
But they would also, at this point, they'd go on points anyway. Like they get to go no matter what, but they have 310 points. So it's like they're going anyway. There's some redundancies just in case of crazy scenarios, but like G2 are going. So it's the teams that are the most scared right now. Like KC has always been a long shot. GX has always been a long shot. But SK, for a team that was so dominant in a regular season and has looked really good, like if they don't show up now, it all just goes to
Well, I'm looking forward to talking about SK because I have some takes.
Well, let's do it then. Let's transition over. Upcoming games this week. I guess we'll start with SK.
Well, I mean, Drakos, we've done many podcasts throughout the years. Isn't the strategy to always talk about like the most popular teams earlier rather than later?
But Yeah. All right, let's talk about the clickbait game. All right, everybody, G2 versus KC.
Well, oh my God, are you excited about G2 versus KC? Tune into this timestamp now to hear the conversation. There you go. There's your clickbait for the start.
I genuinely thought there was like a bug or something, and you got really freaked out because you were so normal. I was like, oh my God, I was like, what? What am I worried about?
No, that's Vedi. That did not catch me off guard at all. Okay, G2 versus KC. Wow. So,
The
good on
highest
KC.
viewership game of the year.
Good on KC for making it this far.
Yeah, so
They are still bad.
I was thinking about it.
They are better, but they are still bad.
So I was thinking it because, like, I have taken the last week and a half off, right? Like, I treat League very much like a job these days. Work-life balance, very important to me. So, like, I've been disconnected. I was thinking about it on a drive to work today, thinking about, like, what do I think about KC? And I was kind of like, they were in the shipwreck along with many other teams.
Yeah.
Right? But they, unlike Jack, climbed aboard the thing of
The door.
of wood. All they had to do was fend off everyone else trying to clamber on top of the life raft. Okay, and like I kind of. Their whole strategy, like they did not have a good split, right? No. There were bright spots. I was really impressed with Laddie as a mid laner. Like, in particular, just because I think we already talked briefly on this podcast about rookies and how difficult it can be. Imagine you're joining KC, one of the most popular teams, just like period.
Well,
right?
you're promoted in this case. So you're promoted,
you're already there,
and you have that fandom behind you, and people are like, "Oh, you're gonna save. You're gonna do it."
It could be like I don't even know what the KC fans were saying. Okay, but all I know is Saken was very popular. Okay, he was. I read many comments about 4-time ERL champ should get a spot at Worlds. Okay, so there was a lot of enthusiasm, and so to then bench a player like that, and then to put in a rookie. Obviously, fans are probably going to have like questionable, but like they're gonna follow through. They're gonna trust the plan because they're devoted fans. That's the word I'm looking
devout
for.
KC followers.
Yeah, devout KC followers. So like fair. And then he comes in,
blessed commando,
and he plays really well. Like he performs way above my expectations. I thought that the pressure might be getting to him, but it feels like that he's playing with a lot of confidence. And while every single game wasn't flawless, I just felt like that his base level was very high. And so I was just pleasantly surprised with him as a player. And when we talk about like players that, you know, at the end of the day, if you ever want to stand a chance of getting a title, you have to be willing to play against Caps. And like, obviously he's not at that level yet, but I'm very optimistic about his trajectory and the level that he's playing at. And when you pair them up with Closer, who like they're a brand new mid-jungle synergy. And the advantage of that is you kind of get to figure out how you want to play the game together. And I think that he has also been instrumental in a lot of their successes. I think that he is a player, clearly has a great map awareness. He comes in with very clear plans with what he wants to do. And sometimes those plans don't come together. Fine. Okay. They're not a flawless team, definitely by any stretch of the imagination. But they make it work. And so like the changes paid off, in my opinion. The biggest disappointment was their top laner Kana. I don't think that he's delivered on like the expectations that were put on him. But honestly, the mid jungle that they introduced really did change the dynamics of the team. And I've been pleasantly surprised with how well that they've been playing together. Do I think that's enough to beat G2? No.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like,
pleasantly surprised.
I appreciate all of the like positivity, but at the end of the day, like I think that this is the least favored team of our top 8, which is crazy to say, given how Mad Lions Koi like really again crawled into playoffs. But
I was gonna say I feel like they could beat Mad Lions Koi.
I'll say so. Here's my argument.
That's an interesting debate.
KC, right? We have seen a ceiling from 7 out of 8 teams in our playoffs, except for maybe GX, but GX have been on a pretty consistent upward trajectory. So let's say 6 out of 8 teams. GX and KC not a part of this for me. A ceiling that is pretty good, right? Team Heretics, we saw, yes, they collapsed against Fnatic. No, in spring, they collapsed against Fnatic, but they were pretty good. Yeah. We've seen a ceiling. Fine. We have seen them play good League of Legends.
Sure.
We have seen KC play one pretty good game of League of Legends. We have seen them steal a win from Mad Lions Koi, which was an embarrassment to Mad Lions Koi. We've seen one other game that was all right. You know what I mean? And that's not to discredit, because you're right. I think there is improvement. But
yeah, let me double check.
If we want to talk about what the best form of all of these teams, the best form of MDK clears KC, the best form of Team Heretics clears KC, the best, you know, like This is a
I
really
see what you're saying.
And
I see what you're
so-
saying.
if KC are going to do this, it is from nowhere.
Yeah, so to clarify, but this is what I mean, right? Okay, yeah, this is perfect. Why I said that, like, all they did, like, all you had to do is keep your head above water in our current split,
They
right?
just didn't drown. Like,
Because
our bottom
they
four
beat
teams-
Giant X, they beat Mad Lions,
Yes.
they beat Rogue, and they beat Vitality. The teams that they needed to beat, they beat, right? So they are quite comfortably in the middle of the pack,
Yeah.
which, like, to their credit is something, because our bottom of the, like, outside of the top 4 in the LEC, it's been a mess, right? It has been an absolute clusterfudge.
And they made playoffs, which good on them. But I don't want to pretend like, and it is, no matter who they were matched up against from the top 4 teams, they would be heavy underdogs.
But I feel like that's the story of our playoffs, is it not? Like,
Sure.
I feel like that we
But
are
I do
a
want to clarify
top-sided
that
league.
as while I've seen progress from KC, this to me, again, it's them
we
or
get
like,
it.
I'm not
You hate
saying they're-
KC. We get it,
But I'm
okay?
like, I'm not saying
I
they're
just don't
turning-
want to pretend like just because I like what Closer's doing and Vladdy's doing that this team is suddenly they will
Yeah,
probably.
yeah, yeah.
I'm not
they
saying
might
that they're
get
heavy
a
favorites.
game. They
I'm
might
not
get
try-
a game
Okay.
in all
Hang on,
of
but
playoffs.
I'm not saying they're heavy favorites.
Two
but
games
like,
in all of playoffs
Current-
would
No,
be
bro, that's
impressive.
cooked.
current form Heretics doesn't fill me with a lot of confidence.
Agreed.
That is a game where I
None
could
of these.
see either
Agreed.
team.
No. All of our bottom 4 teams are bad.
Yeah, okay, so okay.
My argument is more so I don't think
yeah.
like I don't think KC is clear cut the worst team.
I agree.
Is basically where my head's at.
Yeah.
I'm not
agree.
saying they're heavy favorites in any of these games, but I'm saying that there are with their current form of several of our teams, I see them as like bottom with MDK and probably Heretics.
Okay, yeah.
Would be, but in that pool rather than a clear cut bottom.
So I am aligned with Dagda in that, like, if you just want to talk about playoffs in general, right? Obviously, in my opinion, to vote against anyone that isn't a top 4 team, like to vote on anyone that is not a top 4 team is an ambitious gamble.
Yeah.
right.
Insane gamble. I would say.
The only team that I genuinely think is beatable right now from our top 4 is Fnatic because of the whole confidence and the trajectory thing, right?
Also GX.
But like it's GX who I like. If it was Mad, then I'd have faith. Like, because their trajectory seems to be going up. Maybe they finally found what they needed to make the magic happen. But again, they beat tiebreakers against our worst 2 teams. Yeah. So how much confidence they really give is mitigated. But the summary of my playoffs analysis is SK, Fnatic, BDS, and G2 should win pretty handily. G2 should 2-0. BDS should 2-0. SK should... Honestly, SK wouldn't surprise me if they went 2-1, but they should 2-0. And Fnatic should also 2-0. Like, that is how the first round of our playoffs should go based on the performance of our regular season. Just because there is such a massive contrast in, like, individual players, in terms of macro, and in terms of, like, drafting, that I have no faith in the bottom 4. Where I think it gets interesting is the next round, where you've got like the Heretics versus Giants or MDK or KC. Like those matchups are pretty interesting in terms of who will actually come out on top, because I think they are closer. And then of course Fnatic versus SK, BDS versus G2. These are also very interesting matchups, right?
I think. Here's my question: of the bottom 4, in our playoffs, which is KC, Team Heretics, Giant X, Mad Lions, Koi. Who do you have the most faith in?
MDK, based on what I saw, based in terms of what they were doing in League, they're the team that I actually have the most reason to believe that they could cause an upset.
I think it might be Giant X for me.
Nah.
Their record is also
so
booty.
think-
Like, don't get me wrong, they beat the same teams -1 that KC beat because KC beat GX. like their
on,
record's
Dagda,
not
hit
good, but
me.
I think that they're like, I actually think that they've shown some stuff on the map that makes me feel like they're not going to beat a top team, but amongst these bottom 4, I think that they should come out on top of the pile.
I think for MDK, it works out well for them that Skarner's gone from the meta because we're coming in onto 14-13.
Sure.
Because I think this is a team, and why, like, looking at their tiebreaker games, I was a bit more impressed with them, is I think this is a team that needs Mirren on a carry and trying to force him into something where he can be comfortable, like the Twisted Fate. I think he plays way better on. So I think if we shift away from those kind of tankier top laners like the Skarner and stuff, I think MDK will look better. But I think my favorite for it is Giant X. I think Giant X have a very clear game plan as to how they want to play it. I think they are better. And the Antonio has really surprised me. I'm not gonna lie. I've been really surprised by how good this guy has been. And then I think they've started to come together more as a team with like how Juhan controls the early game and then setting up for Jackies to be a big carry in the mid game then.
All right, guys. Like, the Giant X cope is real, okay? Like,
Yeah, they literally only beat Mad Lions, Rogue, and Vitality. I know.
Okay,
I know.
So the thing is, I understand from an analyst point of view why they rate them highly, because they do all these certain things very well, right?
They're very rehearsed team.
Yeah, you kind of look at like they have a clear identity, which I think is really strong for, in particular in a regular season that's so volatile. Having an identity is valuable. Like BDS have proven that, G2 have proven that, like. Just having something that you can associate yourself with so that you can come into every game more or less aligned is great, right? The other thing is they are actually pretty good at building early game leads. They've found ways to actually find these advantages, whether it's through like individual performances or like actually just making like good fights happen in the other game. Like they've been able to build leads against teams that they probably shouldn't have built those leads against. And so people have been surprised because you kind of look at them and you sit there and go, oh wow, they've built these leads against a team that they shouldn't have been able to build. I think they actually had a really good game against G2 at some point during the regular season. They also had a good game against one of the other top teams. Like I forget exactly who it was because I don't remember all the Giant X games. So please forgive me on that. But like it's totally valid where the basis of the opinion behind Giant X comes from, but they haven't delivered on it. Like ever. They actually haven't. They get leads and they throw them. They lose team fights. So, they have like their ability to actually win games is poor. Now, don't get me wrong. If you keep investing in this roster, in this team, the potential, you can keep throwing that around. But they haven't actually delivered
and that's why when I talked about
potential.
Okay, when we look at there's two teams in the bottom, KC and GX, whose ceiling remains uncertain. Right. Yes. And so those are the teams that, like, if they really show up, it'll be the biggest surprise. You know what I mean?
Such a big if, though.
No, I agree. But I'm saying that if there's any team I believe in the bottom to do it, I think it is GX. Because while I've seen a higher ceiling from Team Heretics and I've seen a higher ceiling from Mad Lions Koi, like, I don't believe it at this point. If they show up and they're good and they contest, I'll be like, okay, well, they're back. It'll feel like more like they're back on form than like this revelation in the way that they play League of Legends. Whereas like if KC show up and they get a game off G2 and they look really clean in this series, I'll be like, this is mind blowing. Like this is sick. And I will sit here and I'll be like, guys, I was wrong. I did not think you could do this in 2 weeks. They're insane, but like it's so hard. I would never make that bet.
I think it's also like when I look at their schedule, it was like they lost to Heretics week, first day, new team.
Yes, sure.
Right? Then they played Fnatic and SK. And then I can't remember those games, but obviously it was Fnatic and SK were just firing at all cylinders. The G2 game, they really gave them a run for the money and should have won that game. And then it was G2 doing some funky stuff in the later game that brought it back. They then beat MDK, they then beat Vitality. They then, I think they had a close game against BDS, which I think was the other one that you were talking about. They then beat Rogue. And then, yes, they had the loss to KC. I can't actually remember the KC game from after the week break, but it's like, that's not a bad end to that schedule when they started to get stuff together.
My problem is you can use the exact same argument for Vitality. Vitality should have beaten SK. Vitality should have beaten a bunch of other teams. The only difference is Giant X didn't lose to Vitality. I mean, like you could. That's kind of where my pessimism comes from. Is that they come across to me as a very like one-dimensional team in their approach. Like the Antonio, his Rumble has been good to his credit. Like I agree with the sentiment that like. That he has been pleasantly surprising in terms of what he's brought to the top lane. But it's more so that, like, I guess I hear the word thrown around a lot where, like, I see the potential and I understand where the basis comes from. But I believe that in any best of, I just don't think that Giant X has the tools based on its current roster to surprise any of our top teams. Whereas I believe that MDK does. So like in terms of who can actually make an upset, MDK of our like bottom four teams is the one that I could see with their like, they have like very flexible drafts.
Well,
right?
They've done it.
Yeah. They've also done it. That is the easy advantage too.
They've done it.
Right. And like you could sit there and argue, well, Vedi, the only thing they showed you is that they beat our two worst teams. They beat Rogue and Vitality and they secured a spot in 8th place, bro. Like they were terrible the whole split. And like, that's totally valid. And you make a fair point. And they may just go back to their losing ways the second that they get into the best of threes.
What you're saying is you can see the potential.
No, I just know that they've done it. Whereas Giant X have never done it.
No. He doesn't have to imagine the potential. He has seen the potential. That's the problem. We're imagining the potential of GX.
Exactly. You are imagining the potential. That is the difference.
We're putting the little pieces of all of their games over the season
You're
together.
imagining a world where if this fits in the right place, we do it too for I can definitely see G2 beating Gen G. I've seen the world where that can happen. Come back to reality, bro.
I don't know if you remember that episode. I was like, G2's going to 3-0 T1, which was a bold call. Look, I'll be honest, but in my brain, I was like, they're just not going to be ready to adapt. And then how did they adapt? They banned Rek'Sai and Zach, and I was like, never mind, it's GG, it's over.
They've adapted.
They've adapted.
But I think
didn't think it'd be that easy based on what I had seen in scrims, but they adapted. So
I think the
I look
difference
like
is
a douche.
when I look at this, I'm not talking about Giant X beating the top teams. I just think if I was to put Giant X against the bottom teams of Heretics, Karmine Corp, and MDK, I would imagine they would come out as the top.
Interesting.
I think that's the difference where I'm
that.
not saying I think they will beat a G2 or a BDS.
The one I want to prove me wrong is KC.
I want KC to prove me wrong too, because I feel like they're...
If you want to go based off results, the reality is that they have beaten all these teams that are sitting at the bottom, right? They're in the middle of the pack for a reason, in that they showed a modicum of consistency where they lost to the top teams, beat the bottom teams, which is kind of what you want from a middle of the pack team. And so based on this split and based on that result, you can make a fair argument to say that they should be able to lock in 5th place or 5th, 6th, right?
Yeah.
So that means that they lose round 1, they win round 2, and then I think round 3, you have to go, you would end up going against one of the losers of the top 4 teams, and that's where I would then expect them to lose, right?
And I mean,
if they got that result, that's not bad.
Yeah, we've seen crazy runs. Upset was a part of the Fnatic roster that did that crazy lower bracket run, right?
True.
With Adam. And so, again, there is nothing to indicate that they can do this, but...
Except their results.
No, that they can make the crazy lower bracket run.
That's what you mean.
No.
I thought you just meant the thing that I just projected.
No.
I feel like that's very reasonable.
Making 5th, 6th? Yeah, very reasonable. The problem is they have said themselves, right? Top 3, season finals, Worlds. That's where they want to be, right?
Oh, I see.
That is much harder.
Yeah, and I think 100% that's way harder.
It would be cool. And I think for any of these teams near the bottom, I think for Mad Lions, it's more guys, again... You crawled into playoffs. Yeah. Now you just need to crawl into top 6, and I'm pretty sure you're locked. I'm pretty sure if they just get, if they don't scrub out, if they don't just 0-2-0-2 or 1-2, if they don't just lose both series, Matt are just in season
and
finals.
even then, it depends on what happens elsewhere, right?
Sure, yeah, even then, because they're just going to have more points, right? They're already guaranteed 200. They'll get another 15, I think, if they finish top 6. I don't have the points in front of me anymore. But.
Yeah, I think the team I want to see do well is Heretics. And maybe it's just a nostalgia thing where I really like these players, but it's just figure out how you want to play the game. I think if you actually if you can get these players onto the same page about how they want to try and do things, I think this could be a team that's actually fun. But at this stage, it's been so long that they've been working together and we haven't really seen that magic happen. It's just been maybe that's it. I'm just disappointed that it hasn't been that magic in that part.
I think the thing that we've been saying about Heretics still remains true. We're still waiting for that carry to step up. When we look at the Fnatic game, as much as I want to give credit to Wonder, who did really solo carry that game at Mordekaiser, he did so much work.
Yeah.
Fnatic also screwed the pooch. Fnatic were constantly throwing that game. And again, Team Heretics are good to the point where if they get a lead and you make mistakes, they will punish you and they will end the game. They are solid. The problem is in game states that are neutral, right? They're not always proactive enough. They're not always setting their carries up enough. They're not always on the same page. There's so many little gaps in their game.
But it's also, there isn't really even the early stages, there isn't anything happening.
Yeah.
The reason Wonder got big was because Fnatic dove him and
fumbled the dime. And don't get me wrong, Wonder deserves credit for playing that well, but also, again, rewatched that last night. Fnatic just that was just bad.
They just missed a ton of abilities.
That dive was really questionable, and then they just went with it anyway.
So, one take that I heard, I think it was from Aragon, may have also been from GB. The mid meta changing affected them a lot, which I didn't like. At first, I was like, seems like a lot of weight on Spyro, right? But Nico, Orianna were his 2 most played in spring regular season, right? He had a 100% win rate on Nico, and he won 2 out of the 3 games on Orianna, right? You then get into playoffs of spring, and he's on Azia, where he gets 40% win rate. He wins 2 out of 5 games. Ari and Oriana are the Champions League players, right? Doesn't end up winning a game on Oriana. Either way, right? Like they ended up flopping in playoffs. So they didn't deliver on the expectations, but that split was more so on about like Jankos than it was necessarily. But the key thing that kind of stood out to me was that Zvyro filled a role that kind of enabled Jankos in a sense. And then we come into summer and he's playing Corki, Tristana, and then Talia.
Which
right?
are like, yeah, that's the
they're
meta,
like,
right?
but they're very different champions, right? Like it's a very different role, very different responsibility. And before I felt like I think like it's an interesting argument because you could argue that before Zvyro could easily fit into a team because he could basically be like a role player mid, right? He could pick champions that basically just enable the components of the team.
Yeah.
But now he's responsible for like being a greater carry part of the team because you're forced to play like these 80 carry mids and these like roaming champions at like in the Talia and it's harder for him to both work with Jankos, set up Jankos for success and like to be fair, like I don't want to put all this blame on him, but I do think it's an interesting in that like how metas can define teams. And I always love like Damwon is a great example of a team that like when they won Worlds, they were the best at that meta.
I mean, DRX as well, right?
Yeah. When Invictus Gaming won their World Championship, it was their meta, right? Solo
Also,
laners became kings,
I mean,
right?
even
like,
T1, like
FPX as
most
well,
of the teams that win Worlds win because they
either define the meta.
They either define the meta or they adapt on the fly and like break the meta. But like there almost always is some component of their gameplay that like carries them through in that tournament.
And so I do wonder if meta was something that has really plagued and hurt this roster in terms of their ability to perform.
I definitely.
I was going to say, I just think that in winter and spring, when Nico was popular, every single rookie mid laner got a huge boost because I think that champion is very clear in what it wants to do. And I think that while there certainly were some really great creative moments from Zvyro, especially like where he goes bot lane and he turns into a minion and he catches Noah out, I think.
Sure.
Like he played Nico exceptionally well. Also, just like having a giant AoE CC ult like makes your value to the team much more reliable, much easier to play around. Whereas if you're going to play another carry, I think it's a much more complex game of League of Legends.
I think I definitely agree it hinders to a certain extent, but I think the best version we've seen of Heretics is obviously Zvyro having these picks, but it's also like Trimby working with rank Jankos to roam to go and they'll make a dive top happen or they'll go and play around mid lane.
Sure.
And I think we're not seeing that anywhere near as much, but it's also not so much the mid meta point for me, but the adaptation to, hey, we're actually going to try and play around top side a little bit more. Because if you look at all of our top teams, like G2, BDS, Fnatic even started doing it towards the later half of the split. They all play for void groups. It's like BDS will rotate ice up 4 minutes, like get his push, and then they'll immediately take void groups. All of our top teams are doing it. And Heretics is, you will almost every single game see Jankos attempt to steal one right as it comes
terrible,
through.
Man. It's so
exactly,
bad.
yeah. And that's where I'm like, there's nobody linking or working together on this team. And like, sure, you can maybe look back and go, hey, well, if Zvyro's on something where maybe it's just Zvyro feels comfortable to go, right, lads, get on the bus, we're going. Like wherever the hell, maybe it was Zvyro just having a more impactful voice because he was on champions that could have that impact.
Maybe.
I don't know. But it just feels like the onus should be on the veterans and be like, hey, Flackid, I'm going to leave you here. I'm going to go and roam with Jankos so we can try and play with Zvyro, or I'm going to get mid push for Zvyro so then we can play for Void Grubs or play for Dragons or whatever it is. But it doesn't feel like there's ever a cohesive.
I mean, our narrative was that they just lacked an identity this split, right? Even their very first win of the split, I remember casting it and I remember thinking to myself, Heretics didn't do anything.
Yeah.
They literally just let Giant X lose.
Like it's the same when they get to like mid to late game. It's like, yes, lads, you've got the lead. All right, cool. We're gonna.
Well,
vision again.
Yeah, like they definitely it felt like that they played very scared almost, you know. And we even heard it from Jankos, I think, in an interview where he said that like I felt like we didn't use our lead very well. But like I remember one, I asked you guys, we have our caster Discord, and I was like, was Jankos inting in this play? And it was an interesting debate that kind of everyone had. But there was this, I forget who it was.
Play.
No, he was on Karthus. It wasn't, yeah. Also, I appreciate that he didn't call me out. He mainly called out Gilius and Dom. Yeah. But I too said that he did it wrong. So I humbly apologize to Jankos. How dare I doubt you? Thank you for educating me on Sejuani mechanics. That is my bad. but yeah, he went to Drake, right? He did Drake. That was fine. Dragon was fine. But then it seemed to me like he believed that enemy team, I think it was SK, they were doing grubs and he wanted to contest them. And so he just kind of walked up while his bot lane reset.
Yeah.
And so I sat there and I thought to myself, like, I think it's fine if he wants to stall, waiting for his bot lane to regroup and then contest the grubs as a team. But he just starts grubs, and then like he has the grubs aggro, and
bro.
then and what you think?
No, it just ever since Not Like Us, people have been staying away from Drake. You have to understand that his insistence on starting grubs there really makes sense. You know, he doesn't want to be on the wrong side of the grubs Drake debate.
That's funny.
Sorry.
Meet the grubs.
But yeah, like the coordination from the team there just felt off. The initial decision from Jankos to actually start the grubs, the way in which the team then kind of like were mixed on whether they actually wanted to fight it or not, the timing of everything, like that to me was just a clear example of just the team not being on the same page, mixed calls, not being aligned, and
I think it's important to note too that the team, while the rosters remain the same, the coaching staff has changed pretty significantly, right? Like Kyrie left this year, Peter Dunn is having a kid. I don't remember the entire context, so he's taking a step back, and so you've got the two guys coming in, and I don't know how to pronounce your names. I know Naruto because Naruto, but Machuki is their head coach now. So like they changed their staff very recently, and I wonder if they're maybe not all focusing on the same page or if there's been an adjustment period there, because this is worse than spring, right? Most notably. Yeah. And I wonder if that has been a shock to the system.
If they get sixth, if they lose round one and then they win their first game in the losers bracket, they will be the same.
Which is so, which has been par for the course, to be fair.
Spring was a disappointment for them in that like they were tied for first, finishing 6-3, and then they ended up being a disappointment in playoffs. So like
they did finish, I think, one place higher than Winter, where I think they finished seventh.
Did. Yeah. They had a better performance.
So if they get like fourth, if they get top four.
Yeah, but if any of these teams break into the top four, I'll be impressed. Yeah. And like we spent a lot of time talking on Heretics. The teams that I really want to talk about, right, are the top four. I don't know how much time. How much time do we have left?
We're gonna have to keep it quick. We're gonna have to keep it quick.
So like, SK is our worst top four team. Is my take.
Explain.
I think that their mid game is bad, and not for the same reason. And what I mean by that is like every game, I feel like you could pick something different for what went wrong. Like someone gets caught out, they made a poor macro move, they executed their comp poorly, something. Like I don't have full confidence in their ability to generate early game leads. I feel like a lot of their wins are actually them coming back. And even though they have an 8-1 record, the Vitality game, they definitely should have lost. Their BDS game that they kind of stole the Baron, huge credit to Luon. But a lot of their like, wins were from like individual star carry performances.
I mean, I can think of 3 games. Rahel single-handedly won that Kai'Sa game. Luon on that Alistar game. I think Niski won a game from them.
With his we had Irrelevant on his Camille. Like
there's a lot of the individual pieces are really cracked.
And so this is the cool thing about SK, because very rarely have you ever gotten to say that individually they've been solo carrying games, right? Which is like, that's awesome. Great for you, SK. And so like you can sit there and like you've made the argument for G2 before, so why isn't the same true for SK? And that's one of the things where I'm like, it's true that they have a star factor, which is a very difficult thing to acquire, I would say, because in contrast to BDS, their biggest criticism is that they don't have that kind of star power, right? Often you don't attribute their success to an individual. You attribute their success to having great team play. Their team fighting has historically been very good. Their macro in the early game is near flawless. I think it is the best macro in our league based on the regular season. But like, they have had some incredibly clean early games, and the way in which they transition that early game into them winning team fights, like, I think that they've just got a very solid understanding of macro, where it like doesn't compare to G2 is where you get like creative and flexible in the macro, like that on the fly split second decision where you're not coordinating as a team. Like we'll see sometimes like Caps makes a decision where he goes, I'm going to push this wave because on this wave, I'll be able to move here and do this. And like Broken Blade also has that great sixth sense where he knows that he can do certain things on a side lane, or like, oh, I can get vision here.
There's always a ward somewhere for me.
Right. And so like there's all these little nuance things that kind of separates G2 from BDS, but at a core, BDS's macro is great. And so what I think is really fascinating about this team is like overall as a team, BDS seems more well-rounded and better. And even though SK took the first place spot because they beat BDS, you can make the argument that BDS shouldn't have lost that game to SK, and they were on track to then go 9-0. And their win against G2 was clean, and their win against Fnatic was clean. They stomped both those teams in very convincing fashion, and they were on track to do the exact same thing as SK. And then the ban thing happened, where Luan like had a really great play with his Alistair, and like, you know, credit to SK, they came back, star performances, they deserve that. But I have a lot of confidence for BDS. It's unlucky for them that they're going up against G2 in the next round, assuming that both perform as expected, because I think that, and that's the thing for MDK, of all the teams to get, BDS is like your worst matchup, because
their other teams will flip against you. Like you could Fnatic, you got a chance because they're like all over the place.
100%.
You know, SK all over the place.
Because I can see, like, if you want to like rely on star power, MDK is a roster that definitely has that potential. Like Eljoya can make those hero plays. I think Super definitely has his moments. But BDS, they're solid, man. Like, you're not going to beat them just like, I think it's very hard on star power alone to just beat this team. You need a good foundation, because BDS is very consistent and reliable. So like these two teams, to me, the surprising top four in a sense, not so much for BDS because they're now kind of a mainstay in the top three. Expectation for them should be minimum top three for BDS, minimum.
It's a weird situation where I actually think that the wild card in playoffs is not SK. I think it is Fnatic.
100%. Yeah.
I think BDS is their second best team in the league.
100%.
Yeah, in terms of consistency. And like, don't get me wrong, in terms of ceiling, Fnatic are really good. But again, in the same way that we talked about ceiling the previous one, Fnatic are also on a downturn, and we know that this team, when they crash hard, right? Like, if BDS lose a series, I still trust them to come beat a team below them in the standings in the next series. Yeah. You know what I mean? Fnatic lose a series, all bets are off.
All bets are off.
All bets are off. Complete and total collapse.
My favorite thing about this split has been watching fans be like, guys, I don't know who this Fnatic is, and it makes me uncomfortable. And then they lost to G2, and they're like, oh, okay, there they are. And like the fans, they're just like,
Team
they're
Liquid
so
again.
funny. They're so funny because like on Reddit specifically, I love reading Fnatic fans' comments because like they know exactly what they've gotten into. You know, like they know who their team is. They are tried and true fans. They've been through every version of Fnatic. They know them at their best. They know them at their worst. And when they see them playing well, they don't get optimistic. They get skeptic. Like that's not the right word. They get
skeptical.
That's the word. Yeah. And they're just like, this seems too good to be true. I don't like this at all.
Yeah, they've been hurt before.
And now that they're like on a downward spiral, they're just like, phew, okay, cool. Now I know what I have.
I have a friend of mine, Yanni, who's a Fnatic fan. Shout out to him. But it's like, it's the exact same thing where it's like, he's like, I'm done with this. I'm fed up. I'm not a Fnatic fan. And then like the new season comes along. He's like, ooh, player, new player. I'm a Fnatic fan. This is great. And then like the slow deterioration over the split where he's like, we're playing well. This is great. I think it's going to go. No, it's not going to go well. It's so funny.
Yeah, I mean, like, you should have every confidence in them. You know, like, they had a great regular season. The pieces are there. Like, there's clearly their ceiling is high. Yeah. We've seen what that ceiling looks like. It's just a question of, are we going to get it? We don't know.
They're so good. Like,
that's why I said SK like the clear fourth for me, because I know exactly what Fnatic can give me. And I'd like to think that with a week and a half off, but they weren't off.
They weren't off.
They were in EWC losing. Like, just kind of like, oh no, what a Fnatic are we gonna get?
We also don't know who got to scrim international teams, because presumably
they went for one day of competition to lose. Like, what does that do to a team? I don't know.
I don't know either.
NA. It's got to stay.
Yes.
Like, if you lose to
Again,
G2,
the last time they lost to Team Liquid, though, they came
NA,
back and they were really good. They said that, like, we had the Team Liquid talk.
Oh, that's the two. There's the two versions of this, is that they lost to Team Liquid again, which will surely reignite the fire.
Yes.
You know?
Or it'll ruin their mental forever.
Or they'll be done and gone. And I'm... God, it would be so sad if that's the case. Like, again, they still have enough points. They're most likely, Rob said it earlier, more than like 90-something% of scenarios they're going to go. But like, this team... Every other team here, I would be very surprised if they collapsed. But Fnatic, I wouldn't be surprised, but I would be very sad.
Yeah.
I think they're the type of team that will like win round one, lose to SK, do some crazy lower bracket run. Right? That's just kind of how I see Fnatic, very similar to what we got from them in spring. G2 versus BDS, I think is going to be really exciting. Like, I am assuming that the top four teams are going to win.
Yeah.
Because I think based on what we saw in the regular season, they are just a clear cut above. But yeah, G2, we didn't talk a huge amount about them. They also failed at EWC. They dropped a game to FlyQuest. And like NA was having a field day. It was like all of them were just like, it was so funny because I didn't watch any of the games, but I read the post-match threads and I was just seeing like, they were all just like, the 4th of July buff is real, let's go. And then the day after, they're like, the 5th of July buff is just as good. And so they were riding the high, you know, they took game off G2, they 2-0 Fnatic. Everything seemed to be growing great for NA. And a lot of EU doomers, obviously.
The EU doomers are ready to be doomed all the time.
Yeah. So like G2,
guys, we're not doomed. I swear.
G2 struggling against FireQuest.
Team Liquid is just good, and G2 is just G2.
And then Top Esports apparently had a great tournament. Like it was funny reading all the comments about that. You know, the moment you mentioned that it's not a Riot International event, Top Esports suddenly becomes the best team in the world.
Tien isn't under pressure. He's just like, oh, I can play now.
And it just seems to be this consensus among LPL fans where they're just like, why does he always do this?
I hate talking about Tien. Every international event we have to talk about Tien. It's a curse. It is a curse to talk about Tien.
And so, so G2, I mean, like, I think that we can still be confident about G2 as a team coming back. I feel like that practice seems to only do them well. They always seem to learn whenever they get a bit of extra international experience.
Also, the question marks around whether or not Fnatic still deserve the plot armor we give them are fair. Like G2 still get their plot armor.
Yeah, they do.
They're
Sorry,
two-time
guys.
split
G2,
champion.
they get the plot armor.
They get the benefit of the doubt.
They just
But
get
it's
it.
also like the last time everyone doubted them, they then showed up at MSI and were like, hey, we're actually one of the top teams here. So it's like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, admittedly.
No.
We'll stop there.
Folks, this weekend, the LEC is on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. You've got that right. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Friday, we've got SK and Team Heretics starting off our playoffs. BDS versus MDK next. And then on Saturday, Fnatic versus GX in our match of the week. G2 versus KC. Absolute banger. Maybe.
Yep.
Maybe. So
or
tune in
stomp.
for that. Thanks, Betty. Thank you again, Betty, for joining us.
Sorry, Euphoria fans, for rambling. That's why I'm dangerous on these podcasts.
No,
Thanks for
that's
having
what
me,
you're
gentlemen.
here for. We knew what we were signing up for. Thank you, Betty, for rambling. We
If you ever
appreciate
want me to
you.
talk about Lost Ark, happy to.
No, I absolutely don't. Nobody wants that. And that's going to do it for us here. Euphoria episode 16. We'll see you guys next week following the first round of playoffs.
Bye.
Bye-bye.